This story begins the way most urban legends don't, with paperwork. Not a whisper in a hallway or a shadow down an alley, but an email. Routine, time-stamped, ordinary in every way except for what it allegedly contained. A missing person's flyer attached. A name. A school photo. An age that should have ended every grown-up conversation in the room. According to those who claim to have sent it, the message went to a music manager whose job description did not include crisis triage. They say the subject line was blunt, and the request even blunter. She's with you. She needs to come home. What followed has been argued over in comment sections and podcasts, dissected in threads that get locked and unlocked like doors in a haunted house. Some people insist the manager never saw the email. Others insist he did, and that events the very next day prove it. They say the girl returned home, frightened and stubborn, the way teenagers do, insisting she could handle herself. And then, not long after, she vanished again, slipping through the cracks in a life that didn't have enough guardrails and into a circle that didn't have enough adults. The artist at the center of that circle had a rising profile and a curated darkness that played well on camera. Fans described the music videos as cinematic, moody lighting, long takes, a performance that teetered between confession and theater. The manager, for his part, cultivated distance. He posted photos of his kids, his morning runs, his laptop open on a spotless table. The label said nothing at all, which labels are very good at doing. Silence can be a statement. It can also be a habit. Online, it read like both. We don't know everything, and where the facts end, allegations begin. But here is the outline, assembled from public chatter, secondhand accounts, and documents people claim exist. The missing person's email is alleged to have landed in late winter. A day later, the girl went home. Weeks after that, she was reportedly seen again near the artist's apartment. Friends from school say they messaged the manager directly when she disappeared the second time, skipping over hotlines and going straight to the adult they believed would know. Some take that as proof of involvement. Others call it the logic of teenagers. You text the person you think will answer. When the story turned catastrophic, it wasn't because of a dramatic chase or a televised plea. It was because of a car parked where cars get parked, on a slope where blue sky stares down at a narrow street. Neighbors claim it barely moved for weeks, just a lurch to the left or the right, the kind of shuffle drivers do to appease street sweepers or avoid a ticket. No tarp, no garage, just a vehicle that had supposedly become furniture, taking up space and growing invisible. Not invisible enough. The smell was what cut through the denial. Workers at a tow yard are said to have noticed it first, and from there the story moved forward like a falling object. Gravity took over. There are parts we won't describe here, not for mystery but for respect. It's enough to say the discovery in the trunk transformed grief into something else. Anger, mostly, and an urgent hunt for accountability. Everything that came before felt newly sinister, like a movie you rewatch after learning the twist. A music video with a body dragged across a floor is just performance until real life intrudes. Then it becomes a mirror nobody asked to look into. A rumor about a bracelet stamped with a single letter is just a rumor until the internet remembers a necklace with the same initial, and then it becomes a theory. And once something is a theory online, it rarely returns to being a coincidence. From that moment on, the conversation split into two unsparing paths. One group said the artist had crossed a line so obvious it didn't need to be painted. A teenager is a teenager, no matter how mature the pose, no matter how compelling the music. Another group, smaller but loud, insisted that if there were real evidence tying the artist to the worst part of the story, there would already be handcuffs. They pointed out that law enforcement has moved faster with less. They saw the quiet from officials as a gap, and in that gap they placed different names. The manager felt that shift first. He had been a ghost in the narrative, the adult behind a talent whose brand thrived on bleakness. But ghosts aren't immune to attention. People pulled at threads and found other names he'd worked with, other scandals he'd floated near. They found denials, as smooth and polished as a press release. They found a rhythm to his statements. I didn't live there. I didn't know. I didn't receive any emails. I work remotely. I'm with my family. This is tragic. Please be factual. To some, this sounded like the only responsible thing a person in his position could say. To others, it sounded like the choreography of distance, when private investigators, the sort who make their reputation by counting receipts, claimed they had seen the email and that authorities had asked for it. The conversation tightened another notch. The manager didn't budge. Either he had never received it, or he had and didn't remember, or he did and it didn't matter. Depending on what you already believed, his words were either the sober truth or a script written by a lawyer with a well-worn delete key. The label's silence, meanwhile, became its own character. People dug through old rosters and young signees, pointing out that this was not the first time the industry and adolescents had been made to coexist, sometimes in ways that looked different in hindsight. The label didn't respond. In its absence, the audience set up its own courtroom. Subreddits buzzed. TikTok lives multiplied. Clips were posted, stitched, reposted, and sometimes taken down with the efficient bluntness of copyright policies. Threads locked themselves like doors slammed by the wind. Conspiracy thrives in that kind of architecture. Every removal looks like a confession. Every empty statement looks like complicity. Every silence looks like a plan. Then there were the kids who actually knew the girl, friends, classmates, the kind of young people who learn how to be witnesses before they learn how to be adults. They talked about her dreams and her jokes and the way she wanted out of a life that kept pressing too hard on her shoulders. They said she was vulnerable in the way that makes older men feel powerful, offering a better apartment, a better crew, a ride up the hill in a black car with tinted windows. They claimed she had run away more than once and that every return home felt more temporary than the last. Each time she left, the stakes went up. Each time she came back, the clock reset with less time on it. Some point to a comment left months before the discovery on a video that gained traction for the wrong reason. "Waiting for the police to find out about the 13-year-old," the commenter wrote, or something like that. It sat there in public view, a needle in a field of needles. Nobody knows who wrote it. People say it looks damning now that we know the worst. Others say the internet predicts everything eventually, and the few that land close are the ones we remember. This is the problem with hindsight. It makes profits of gossips and diaries of timelines. There was also the matter of the key card, a piece of plastic the size of a hotel room key that can unlock a life. A neighbor claimed they found one near a hillside house associated with the artist. They admitted they picked it up without thinking. Later, when the internet turned that card into a relic, they said they gave it to the police. Was it actually linked to the car that mattered? We don't know. But the idea that such a small, ordinary thing could be the hinge of a tragedy kept people awake. Meanwhile, the manager continued insisting on his distance. He did not live with the artist. He worked from another state, another schedule. His job didn't put him in the room where the choices were made. He was, by his own telling, a spreadsheet away from everything. In response, critics listed the daily realities of management: tour dates, housing, travel, budgets, approvals. How could a person responsible for all that not sense when something was wrong under his client's roof? The question isn't proof, but it is a good question. That's the line the story walks from here on out. Questions so good they feel like answers. As the weeks wore on, the narrative hardened the way wet cement does under a summer sun. A small crowd held candles near a curb cut into a quiet street, their voices hoarse from a chant that always sounds the same: justice, justice, justice. They taped paper to a lamppost and let flowers spill out of their hands. They asked how a teenager could vanish in a city watched by cameras and still end up found by accident. They asked why the people with the power to fix things kept explaining why they couldn't. They pointed at the adults who should have put down their phones and picked up responsibility. When adults do nothing, teenagers pay the interest. For a while, the most persistent sound was typing. Threads building timelines no journalist could publish without 6 more sources. Fans cross-referencing Instagram stories with flight logs. Sleuths peering into music videos like archaeologists reading inscriptions. One clip in particular came up again and again. A scene in which the artist plays both predator and prey, dragging a body toward a trunk. Art imitates life until it doesn't. Some said the parallel was eerie. Others said it was an example of how we reframe everything after a disaster, looking for meaning in places that never held any. The truth might be that everything looks like a riddle when we want answers we can't have. And still, the label said nothing. The artist said nothing. The manager said only that he knew nothing, received nothing, lived nowhere near anything. He emphasized his fatherhood, which some people found humanizing and others found strategic. When he said the news had been difficult for his family, it was true in a way that required no proof. Grief and outrage aren't opposites. They are parallel lanes that never quite merge. There were whispers about new evidence, footage perhaps, or metadata that would make the internet feel vindicated. None of it has been confirmed here. We won't assert what we cannot verify. But those whispers changed the temperature of the room. Suddenly, the argument wasn't just whether the artist knew. It was whether the manager did more than know. Did he arrange housing? Did he craft a wall of adult words to protect a brand that wouldn't survive daylight? Or was he exactly what he said he was? An administrator who stayed on his side of the screen and trusted other people to do their jobs. Here is where this story becomes less about a car or an email and more about a culture that confuses access with care. A teenager found a door open to a world that promised escape, and everyone on the other side forgot or refused to ask whether she was old enough to walk through. People love to talk about personal responsibility when they are not the people in the room who can take any. The industry runs on plausible deniability the way engines run on oil. Everyone touches everything and no one leaves fingerprints. That raises a final set of questions that won't make you feel better. If the email exists, why didn't it end everything the first time? If the friends messaged the manager directly, why were they in that position at all? If a car sat for weeks on a public street, what does that say about the way we don't see what we don't want to? If a label can wait out a storm until public attention moves to the next lightning strike, what does that say about how accountability dissolves in a calendar? In the end, the girl's name belongs to people who remember her for who she was, not what happened to her. The rest of us are left with a cautionary tale about proximity and power. The artist created a world where darkness could be consumed at a safe distance. The manager built a professional life from staying off camera. The label perfected silence. None of that prevented a tragedy that now shapes everything they touch. If the authorities someday connect the dots with evidence that will stand under oath, the story will turn again. If they don't, the story will still be a verdict on an ecosystem that made a teenager the weak link in a chain of adult decisions. Until then, all we have is a collage of alleged emails and key cards, of neighborhood recollections and frozen frames from old videos. We have a street where a car sat too long and the memory of people who left candles there. We have the hollow comfort of believing we would have done better, said more, acted faster. We like to imagine ourselves as the neighbor who notices, the friend who calls twice, the manager who reads every subject line. Maybe that's the only useful part of a story like this, the invitation to prove it in real life, to be the adult who checks the trunk and the timeline, who returns calls after midnight, who refuses to let silence do the talking. Some will keep searching for that bracelet, that letter, that exact match between jewelry and rumor. Some will stare at the artist's face in an old video and wait for it to confess. Some will refresh a docket until a new motion appears. Some will move on because moving on is how people survive the internet. The family, meanwhile, will keep a different vigil, one the rest of us can't perform. They will collect the unglamorous details of a person they loved and refuse to let her be defined by a thing that happened to her. If justice arrives, it will arrive in the form of paperwork again. Warrants, filings, exhibits with numbers in the corners. It will be ordinary the way that first email was ordinary, the way a key card is ordinary, the way a sedan parked on a street is ordinary until it isn't. That is the worst lesson this story teaches. Horror hides in plain sight and grows polite around people who don't want to be inconvenienced. The best lesson is its mirror. Ordinary diligence saves lives. Answer emails. Ask ages out loud. Decline invitations that put minors in adult rooms. Break the rhythm of silence. Refuse to be remote when presence is required. We say this is an alleged story because it is. It is also an unfinished one. Somewhere, in an office with fluorescent lights, someone is still examining timestamps and cross-checking locations. Somewhere else, someone is rehearsing statements that say nothing and mean less. Between those rooms is a distance the length of a city. The rest of us live in the space between, where doubt and conviction shadow each other, where memory and speculation braid themselves into the only thing the public ever really owns: a narrative. If you're still here, you don't need a final twist. You need an answer that won't arrive today. What will arrive are more claims and counterclaims, more posts that vanish and reappear, more names that become hashtags and then become warnings. Pay attention to the boring parts. The next clue won't sparkle. It will look like an email you don't want to open, a responsibility you didn't ask for, a choice you can't pretend isn't yours. That is the narrow door where tragedies either end or begin.